For most men, shame and guilt are rarely seen as abuse. Instead, it's written off as pressure, expectations not met, and disappointment from your partner or disappointment in yourself. Genuine, deserved, earned shame and guilt should have a place in your life. It's a part of healthy emotional ownership. However, in the hands of an abusive partner, these emotions are twisted and weaponized. The abuser induces these emotions in you as a system of control, one that is designed to make you shrink on command or get you to act in ways that serve her, not out of fear, but because you believe you've somehow failed, when in reality, you have not. In shame based abuse, you hear lines like, "Wow, I didn't realize you were that kind of person." Or she'll outright say, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And she says it when you assert a boundary, when you say no, when you speak honestly, and when it threatens her control. The shame isn't rooted in wrongdoing on your part. It's manufactured to make you feel like your needs, opinions, decisions, thoughts, even your very presence is morally incorrect. You're not just wrong, you're bad. And every time you resist that story, the punishment escalates. When shame is misplaced this way, your internal compass breaks. You stop being able to tell the difference between actual mistakes and imagined failures. You feel guilt for things you should not be feeling guilty for, such as setting a boundary, and you feel shame for traits you should be proud of. And when you finally succeed at something, when you feel the flicker of pride, it burns in your chest like a warning. Even your best moments feel like you've stolen something you didn't earn. An abuser doesn't just induce shame to control you, she feeds on it. There's a satisfaction in watching you fold, in seeing your posture change, your tone soften, your eyes drop. It proves to her that the hook is still in, that she still holds power over how you see yourself. And it's not just control, it's displacement. She can't sit with her own shame, so she transfers it to you. Her cruelty becomes your fault. Her emotional volatility becomes your burden. She offloads her guilt and waits for you to carry it so she can pretend it was never hers to begin with. And then, perversely, she resents you for it. She feels disgusted by your sadness, annoyed by your apology, indifferent to your attempts to repair. She blames you for feeling what she made you feel. And in that twisted cycle, you become the keeper of her shame while she walks away untouched. This is the focus of today's episode, where we unpack the various ways that shame and guilt are used as coercive tactics, why they're so effective against men, why they're so hard to name, and why the silence around them causes so much damage. This is Stand Again, a lived experience platform for men healing from psychological abuse. If this names something you've never been able to explain, please like and subscribe and visit standagain.com.au for support. Shame is one of the most effective weapons in an abuser's arsenal. It's subtle, slow, but relentless. It rewires how you see yourself and what you believe you deserve. In coercive control, shame isn't a side effect, it's a strategy. Abusers construct it deliberately, using a calculated stream of accusations, emotional withdrawal, corrections, and tone shifts, each one designed to pull you away from the truth. Shame is the internalized belief that you're not good enough, that something about you is defective, inadequate, or unworthy of love. It's not the same as regret or self reflection. Shame doesn't ask you to grow, it convinces you that who you are is the problem. In abusive relationships, shame is drip fed on purpose. You speak with honesty and you're told you're selfish. You ask for rest and it's framed as weakness. You try to explain and she sighs like you've failed her again. Slowly, you begin to believe your basic needs are flaws, that your presence causes harm. Guilt is a part of the same system because instead of attacking who you are, it targets your responsibility. Abusers use emotional signals, the sigh, the silence, the cold shoulder, to make you feel accountable for their moods. You start walking away from conversations unsure what you did wrong. You rehearse your words. You apologize for existing the wrong way. For men, these tactics strike at the deepest layers of our conditioning. We're raised to carry burdens without complaint, to earn worth through sacrifice. So when shame and guilt are weaponized, they don't just hurt, they confirm an old fear that if we fall short, we're nothing. So we try harder, we give more, we overfunction, not because we believe the guilt, but because we've been trained to prove our worth through effort. And abusers exploit that instinct. They turn our decency into a leash. Over time, shame reshapes everything. You start giving more, speaking less, bending further, all to prove you're good. But nothing is ever enough because the point is not fairness. The point is control. Let's take a look at 9 different ways an abuser creates shame and guilt in a man. The first way an abuser creates shame is through false moral framing, a tactic that twists your decency into evidence that you're defective. It doesn't just agree with your values, it redefines them as wrong, then shames you for holding them. She says things like, I can't believe you think that's okay, or that says a lot about who you really are, even when your position is thoughtful or fair. She'll paint it as though it's selfish, bigoted, or cruel, not because it isn't, but because that framing gives her control. This tactic works by moralizing the ordinary. If you want time to yourself, it becomes abandonment. If you ask for fairness, it becomes abuse. If you explain your side, she tells you, that's the problem with men like you. You're not criticized for an action, you're condemned for who you are. And it sticks. You stop defending your beliefs. You start rewriting your thoughts mid sentence. You check every opinion against her emotional weather, not because you believe she's right, but because you've learned that disagreement means punishment. That's the goal of false moral framing, to replace your inner compass with hers, to make you feel ashamed, not just for what you've done, but for who you are. It's not conflict, it's correction. And the longer it happens, the more you stop seeing your values as valid at all. The second way shame and guilt are used to control men is through passive aggressive guilt cues, a tactic that replaces direct communication with punishment delivered through tone, body language, and emotional atmosphere. The abuser creates tension on purpose. She sighs heavily, she closes the cupboard door louder than needed, her voice becomes flat, or she goes silent altogether. You've said something she didn't like, and instead of talking about it, she shifts the entire mood to make sure you feel it. You're made to feel like you've failed, even if you don't know why. You ask what's wrong, and she says nothing. You try to make it better, and she tells you, do whatever you want. But her coldness stays, the pressure builds, and you're the one expected to fix it. This is about control. The cues are set up so that you'll change your behavior without her having to explain or own anything. You become responsible for reading between the lines, for repairing an injury she won't name, and apologizing for harm she won't describe. Over time, this makes you emotionally tense. You scan her tone, you study her posture, you start tiptoeing around topics. You don't speak freely, not because you're unsure, but because you're being trained to associate her silence with punishment. Passive aggressive guilt cues force you into compliance by making disapproval feel like your fault. She doesn't ask you to change, she expects you to adapt. And when you do, it's not because you agree, it's because the emotional pressure leaves you with no other choice. The third tactic is weaponized memory, a deliberate system of control where your past is used against you to manufacture guilt, create emotional imbalance, and deny you the right to move forward. The abuser collects moments where you struggled, made mistakes, or reacted in pain, and then files them away for future use. These aren't remembered in context, they're stripped away of nuance and reintroduced at strategic moments to make you feel defective, irresponsible, or permanently flawed. Apologies become irrelevant. Effort to grow are ignored. She uses your history as evidence that you don't get to speak or that your discomfort is invalid. If you try to express a need or set a boundary, she drags the past into the present to shut you down. And if your memory of the event is different, she accuses you of denial, manipulation, or emotional abuse. This isn't about recalling pain, it's about rewriting it. She builds a selective emotional record that only includes your faults. Positive or neutral memories are edited until they resemble failure. Happy moments are reframed as deception. Shared experiences are reinterpreted to deepen your shame. The tactic reshapes your relationship with reality. You begin to distrust your own memory. You stop pushing back, not because you agree, but because the script is already written. Her version always wins, and in her version, you're always the problem. Weaponized memory is a form of psychological imprisonment. You're not allowed to grow because your guilt is never allowed to expire. You live in a constant state of correction, trapped inside a story she's rewritten to keep herself in power. The fourth tactic is one sided emotional accounting, a system of control where your mistakes are tracked, highlighted, and replayed while your efforts are erased on impact. Where weaponized memory uses the past to punish, this tactic controls the present by erasing the good you do and highlighting every small thing you miss. It's a deliberate tactic that distorts the emotional narrative to keep you in a state of guilt. Every minor misstep is recorded: a forgotten message, a delay in tone, a missed detail. These are logged as evidence that you're careless, inattentive, or failing as a partner. Each one is stored, then used to justify the next wave of disapproval. Meanwhile, the things you do right, the effort you put in, the adjustments you make, the sacrifices you offer are intentionally ignored. The goal is not to acknowledge progress, it's to maintain the imbalance. And when you offer something meaningful, it's reframed as the bare minimum. This tactic dismantles your sense of contribution. You begin to feel like you're always falling short, no matter how hard you try. You find yourself overfunctioning, not to feel appreciated, but to stay out of trouble. You chase emotional stability by overcorrecting a ledger you're not allowed to balance. That's the control behind one sided emotional accounting. It strips you of any sense of worth and installs a permanent emotional debt. One where your needs are selfish, your care is invisible, and your only value is in the next repair. The fifth tactic is gift ledgering and guilt debt, where kindness is never unconditional. Every gesture of kindness from your abuser becomes a future claim against you. Every act of generosity from them becomes a weapon you'll be punished with later. At first, the gifts from them seem thoughtful: a pair of cufflinks, cupcakes on your birthday. But months or even years later, they resurface as ammunition. I go all out for you, you never do the same for me. It's not a memory, it's a bill. Even things you've long paid for, earrings, laptops, and holidays that you purchased for your abuser, are reframed as debts still owed. You're told what you must now buy or do, not as a request, but as a repayment. And if you hesitate, you're met with guilt. You owe me after everything I've done for you. If a gift gets lost, it becomes a moral failure. When the cufflinks mysteriously disappear, you weren't just careless, you were cast as disrespectful, unworthy, undeserving of anything good. She declared she'd never buy you anything ever again, not out of hurt, but as punishment. The result is a constant emotional tally. You're always behind. Every kindness from her becomes a weight around your neck. Your autonomy feels selfish. Your boundaries feel like betrayal. And every conversation comes with a price tag you can't predict, but are expected to pay. That's what guilt debt does. It turns love into leverage. It makes affection conditional. And it ensures you stay small, not because you've failed, but because you're told you never give enough to deserve freedom. The sixth tactic is emotional ledger keeping, where your vulnerability is tracked, stored, and weaponized. Every feeling you shared is logged. Every moment of sadness or stress is turned into an emotional debt. You speak up about what's hard, you ask for support, you cry in front of her thinking it's safe. But she's not listening to understand, she's taking notes. Not for your well being, but for later use. In future arguments, it comes back. I've had to carry you. You're always the one who's struggling. I never get to have a bad day. You're painted as the emotional drain, not because you were dramatic, but because you dared to need. You start feeling like a burden because she treats every emotional moment as a part of a growing case against you. You're not unstable, but she reframes you that way. You're not selfish, but she treats you like your needs are demands. You're not too much, but she makes sure you believe you are. Your emotions are no longer safe. They're tolerated, tracked, and slowly turned into reasons to resent you. You curate how you emotionally show up. You become hyper vigilant of how you are presenting because you've learned that showing anything real will be used against you at a later date. Emotional ledger keeping is designed to erode your confidence in your right to feel. It reframes every need as a demand. It turns your emotional honesty into evidence of failure. And when the tactic takes hold, you begin to pre silence. Not because you've healed, but because you're learning that speaking carries consequences. The seventh tactic is sacrificial martyrdom, where your partner claims the moral high ground by framing themselves as the one who gives everything and slowly casts you as the one who gives nothing. It begins with subtle framing. You hear phrases like, I do everything for this family, or you don't know what I give up. These aren't observations, they're accusations, designed as martyrdom. Her role is framed as essential and exhausting. Yours is treated as optional and insufficient. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Her effort is glorified, your effort is minimized. Her struggles are center stage, yours are interruptions. Even when you work long hours, care for the children, manage the house, the emotional narrative still paints her as the sole contributor, the one carrying the weight while you supposedly coast. The moment you ask for support, she strikes. After everything I do, the implication is clear. She's the one who suffers, so your needs must be invalid. Her narrative becomes a lens through which every interaction is judged. She holds the status of martyr and uses it to silence you. What you don't realize is that her sacrifices aren't real. They are leveraged, used to create a power imbalance because one person is framed as a martyr, the other is cast as the failure. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough to level the scales. That's how sacrificial martyrdom works. It clutters the emotional space with her narrative of burden and leaves no space for your reality to exist. You're not allowed to match her. You're not allowed to be tired because, in her eyes, there's only room for one person to be carrying the weight, and she's already claimed that spot. The eighth tactic is performance comparison and triangulation, where your partner uses the achievements or traits of others, real or imagined, to systematically undermine your sense of worth. It begins with subtle remarks. Ben always makes time for his family. Lauren never has to remind her husband twice. These aren't compliments about others, they're messages for you. You're being measured. Your effort is being weighed against a standard you didn't agree to, and the conclusion is always that you fall short. Over time, the names become familiar colleagues, friends, her ex, even characters from shows or books. Anyone she can position as superior to you becomes a tool. These comparisons aren't designed to motivate, they're designed to humiliate. They reduce your contribution to a scorecard that you're never allowed to win. Even your wins are ignored or dismissed. When you try harder, she finds a new benchmark. When you show up more, she shifts the target. There's always someone doing it better, faster, or with more flair. And every mention reinforces the message you're not good enough. This tactic eats away at your confidence. You begin to see yourself through her eyes, always lacking, always late, always behind, and you stop feeling proud of what you've done. You start carrying shame for the person you are not. That's how triangulation works. It introduces third parties to dominate the narrative and control your self image. You're not judged on your growth, your intent, or your reality. You're judged on an ever changing fantasy. No matter how much you give, you're always made to feel like a disappointment. The ninth tactic is emotional blackmail via injury or illness, where your partner uses their physical or emotional state to override boundaries, extract compliance, and silence you through guilt. This tactic exploits your empathy. When you express a need or set a boundary, she suddenly becomes unwell. You're told she's too anxious to talk, too fragile to be questioned, too sick to deal with conflict. Illness, whether genuine or exaggerated or entirely fabricated, becomes a way to extract compliance, override conflict, and silence you. It becomes a pattern. You bring up an issue, she gets dizzy. You express discomfort, she has a panic attack. You try to hold her accountable, she breaks down in tears. The pain always arrives in response to your voice, and every time it does, you back down. You stop speaking, not because you're wrong, but because her distress is now your responsibility. And if you continue, you're told you're heartless, that you're cruel for pushing her when she's so unwell. The message becomes clear. Your voice is conditional on her stability. Your needs don't matter if hers are louder. This isn't about health, it's about leverage. Her symptoms are timed, patterned, and linked to your resistance. Your empathy is turned against you. Your care becomes currency. And every time you give up your voice to protect hers, that dynamic tightens. You think you are protecting her and being kind, but really you are being shamed into minimizing yourself. That's what makes this tactic so hard to name. To the outside world, if you push to have your needs heard, it sounds like a lack of empathy and compassion. But the reality is, you know the pattern. That's how emotional blackmail via illness works. It's not about real pain, it's about controlling when you're allowed to speak and punishing you when you do. For most men, shame and guilt weren't just emotions, they were expectations. We were taught to obey them. From boyhood, we were shaped by correction, silence, and pressure. We were told to be strong, to endure, to provide, and if we ever caused harm, even by accident, we were expected to fix it without complaint. Guilt took the place of instinct. Shame shaped our sense of duty. They didn't just arrive, they directed us. So when a partner starts making you feel that way, like you've let her down, like your needs are selfish, like your emotions are a burden, it doesn't register as abuse. It feels like something familiar, like a pattern you've followed your whole life, like something you're meant to fix. You interpret the disappointment in her voice as your fault. You take her coldness as a sign that you've done something wrong. You don't recognize it as manipulation because you've been trained to see that shame is deserved. And the world around you confirms it. Society tells men that being male is a problem to apologize for. That if you're made to feel guilt, you've probably earned it. That if you're made to feel shame, it must be because something inside you really is broken. Men are framed as inherently harmful. So when we're hurt, no one wants to hear it. If we try to speak, we're told we're being cruel. If we try to set a boundary, we're called selfish. And if we say we're struggling, we're ignored or even blamed for it. This is why so many men don't name what's happening. Because everything we've been taught says this was just part of the deal. That if we feel small, it's on us to grow. That if we're being made to feel shame, it must be because we've done something shameful. That if we're uncomfortable, we need to be stronger. And over time, the effects become impossible to ignore. You lose trust in your own judgment. You second guess your tone, your timing, your memory. You apologize before you've even spoken. You mute your needs before they reach the surface. You live in constant emotional correction, trying to preempt the next disappointment, the next cold stare, the next silence that says, you're failed again. And here's what makes it even more cruel: the abuser knows this. She doesn't need to yell, she doesn't need to overtly punish. All she has to do is pull the same levers the world already installed in you. She uses society's narrative, the one that says men are dangerous, selfish, or broken, and turns it into a private system of control. She makes your sense of decency your prison. This isn't just emotional conditioning, it's weaponized gaslighting. It teaches you to see emotional abuse as moral feedback. It reframes cruelty as consequence. And when it hurts, you don't push back, you look inwards and ask what you did to deserve it. But none of this is truth. Being made to feel shame does not mean you are bad. Being made to feel guilt does not mean you're failed. And being a man does not make you dangerous, expendable, or undeserving of respect and care. These beliefs are built to keep you quiet when you should be speaking, to keep you compliant when you should be drawing a line, to keep you ashamed when you should be standing up. If something in you knows this isn't right, trust that instinct. You don't need to earn peace through obedience. You don't have to justify why this hurts, and you don't have to carry the shame that was never yours to begin with. Shame, when used as a tactic, seeps into your sense of self. It makes you question your intentions, mistrust your memory, and rewrite your needs as selfishness. It doesn't just quiet your voice, it convinces you that silence is noble. But there is nothing noble about being erased. There is nothing strong about carrying pain that doesn't belong to you. And there is no integrity in a love that requires you to abandon yourself. Healing begins when you name what's been done to you, when you stop calling it conflict and start recognizing it as control, when you stop apologizing for existing and start reclaiming the right to live as a whole man. If this resonated, please share it with someone who needs it. Like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and visit standagain.com.au for grounded, lived experience resources for male victims of family violence. You are not broken. You are not too much, and you are not beyond repair. And no matter how many times you've been knocked down, you can stand again.